This is a brand new design called Purple Mist. It's an imaginary garden with lots of texture, lots of colour, lots of beads and sequins. A really lovely project to do using the organza a little bit just to create a little bit of colour in the background. These are the colours that are in this design. There's a collection of woolen threads, bead thread, variegated threads, all in shades of purple and green. A lovely project, nice colours that will blend well together. The second part of this design is the organza. Alright, so this time we've got a motif to create a little bit of texture in the foreground as well as the main piece on the cotton fabric. So that's, you stitch this exactly the same as you would the cotton fabric. It's great in a spring hoop, that's going to keep it taut, and you're going to build a collection of stitches and then cut out the motif to apply it to the background. So this is my background here. The background has a print on the fabric. You're just going to stitch over the organza. But first of all, I'll just show you how you cut the organza before you start to stitch. So you take the organza, it's a woven fabric, and you're just going to take the organza on the bias and just on the stretchy part, and you're just going to cut some slithers of the fabric, and then you're going to distort it just by pulling the fibres apart and just really making it a little bit messy. And then that's used, and it's going to be placed over the design just to create a little bit of colour before you start to stitch. So you can pin that on, and then we'll begin to start and stitch. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is you're just going to stitch over the printed lines, and that gives you an indication of the size of the stitch, and then you're going to add a little bit more in between the stitches just to build up an area of grasses and texture. So some of the time you will be using a strand of cotton, and then other times you're going to be using a wool, and that's going to give a really nice mistiness to the background. And it works quite quickly over the surface, and that will hold the organza in place. And then once you've covered the top layer, then you're just going to move to the lower area. There isn't a print, so you're just going to add a little bit of stitching just to create some grasses in the lower area. So you've almost got like a gap in between the two. Makes a great noise as it's pulled through. And then when you want to fasten off, you're then going to turn your work over, and you're just going to add a couple of stitches and wind that round, and that's enough to fasten the threads off. So one way to tell whether you're stitching the correct amount, you're working in a 5-inch hoop, and that's the size of the display hoop that you place over your work. So you'll be able to every now and again have a look and admire what you've stitched as you're going along. Okay, for the top area of the picture, there are some French knots for flowers, and this is how you do a French knot. Very easy to do. I've got my work in the frame, and I'm going to hold the thread. I'm just going to wind it round once, twice, and then I'm going to move. You're almost keeping the thread quite high on the needle there, and as you place it into the fabric, almost, not exactly the same place, just like a thread over, as soon as you push your needle in, then you're going to tighten that, and that just gives it a nice shape. So when you pull the needle through, it just travels in on its own, and you'll get a beautiful French knot. So I'm just going to do one more. You can of course do a French knot with just a single turn, and then you're just going to place it into nearly the same place and push that through. And as you pull it through, you'll get a smaller knot. Easy. The next stitch I'm going to show you is a lazy daisy. Alright, so these are going to be worked into the plant that's here at the right hand side. So to do this stitch, you're going to take the thread and just hold the thread out of the way, and then you're going to place the needle into the same place. Just tilt the needle and bring it back onto the surface, and then tuck the thread underneath. And then as you pull the thread forward, it forms a loop, and then you can just hold that loop down, just keeping it in place. And then you're going to repeat that on the printed lines. If you find it awkward to bring the needle back onto the surface, this is one of the stitches that you can take your work out of the frame and just hold the fabric in your hand, and that might feel more comfortable. So either way, and build up a plant. It's a great stitch. So this is an individual chain, almost like the start of the chain stitch. And then if you wish, you can make it into a daisy by rotating the stitch, and that's what you do with the white daisies. But that's a lovely variegated thread, and it'll give nice shadows. Just fasten that off. So as you work your design, just sometimes stand back and have a look at it and admire your stitching. In a lot of our kits we put beads and sequins in, and this time we've got a really special collection of purpley sequins, and we've even got a butterfly, which I think is absolutely gorgeous. So to put the butterfly on, you're then going to, it's got two little tiny holes along the body there, and I'm just going to use the bead thread there just to hold it in place. I've got a knot at the end, and I'm just going to make a couple of stitches, and that's just enough. You can do it twice if you wish, and that's enough to hold this bead, the butterfly, in place. Fabulous colour, it's almost like a hologram. And then just fasten the bead thread off at the end. Now it's just going to hold that butterfly in place. Lovely. So here we have the finished design. The background has been stitched. The motif has been applied just by a couple of stitches using the bead thread. Loads of lovely sparkly sequins, a couple of fly stitches there, and a couple of beads. A really nice project to work, and then once you've completed that, you can mount your work in the display hoop, which is included in your kit.